What is up, guys? Welcome back to the Real Shit. I am your host, Checkers Brea, coming at you live, loud, and clear. Today on the show, we have Lonzo. Let's get connected with him, and he's going to share a couple stories, a couple trials, a couple tribulations. Let's get him on the phone.
Hello.
Yes, this is Lonzo.
Yes, it is.
Lonzo, how you doing? This is Checkers Brea from the Real Shit.
What's going on, Checkers? How you doing, brother?
Man, another day out here, man. Another day.
I feel you, brother.
How you been?
I'm doing well, man. Had physical therapy today. Get to see my surgeon November 30th, so we get to find out what's really wrong with my shoulder. You know, get some answers and figure out when I go to surgery.
What's up, man? You want to give a little background about who you are, what you're about?
Yeah, I would love to. I've been in the department now going on 8 years. Actually, did complete 8 years October 18th of this past month of this year. Started at Pelican Bay State Prison, did 16 months there, worked primarily enhanced outpatient program, Delta Shoe, Facility A, yard crew relief at one point in time, First Watch, Charlie S&E, and then I migrated over to SCC, Sierra Conservation Center, in December of 2016, I believe. And I've been there ever since, mainly on Facility B over there. You know, one of the tier officers on that facility, and, you know, been there all the last 6 years, and that's about it.
Okay. Interesting stuff. So you're an officer with the California Department of Corrections?
I am.
Okay. How's that? What's that like?
Oh, man. Over the first 6 years, I can honestly say we're a lot better than the last two, and they've definitely declined significantly in the last two. I believe that the way the politics and the way that the pendulum has swung as far as left as it has, I'm not saying I'm political. I'm not a hardcore Republican. I'm not a liberal by any means. I honestly don't dive really into politics. I just go based upon my observations and the way things are seen. Just, you know, a lot of things have changed over the last few years, you know, especially when it comes to, you know, the use of force. There's been many amendments on that policy, really triangulating on verbal persuasion and, you know, giving them time to de-escalate themselves in the situation that they're in. But it's crazy because it completely conflicts with what our use of force policy is, you know, which is we are to respond to an imminent threat without delay. And no matter however many amendments, you know, you can put out 844s, training, changes to DOM OPs and stuff like that. You can never deviate from the original. So in a sense, our hands are pretty tied because I'll be honest, the violence within the department is growing significantly. Before, you had all these GP prisons, which is general population, for those of the people that do not know, are housed for, you know, active gang members, active felons that are politicking within their respective gangs or their subsets. And then you had other prisons that, you know, house a different population, which we would call the sensitive needs, which are, you know, your dropout gang members, your sex offenders. And those two different populations don't mix. Well, in 2018, the department observed that 75% of the homicides that did occur within the department occurred on these sensitive needs yards. So they decided that something needs to be changed. So what they started doing on the lower levels of that aspect is they were saying, well, you know what, we'll take both GP and SNY and technically make them non-designated now and house them together. Well, at my prison, Sierra Conservation Center, that started April 29, 2019. And ever since then, it's just been a consistent amount of violence ever since it started. I can't speak for all prisons, but I can speak for my own because it is a fire camp. We process inmates out a lot more frequently, I believe, than most prisons. I can't quote on that. I don't know. I don't really know how many other prisons and how much their intake versus their outtake goes. I know we average about 50 parolees a week, and we'll send about 100 inmates to fire camp a week. So honestly, the yards, the lower yards that I work on, we're actively getting like anywhere between 80 to 90 inmates a week per yard. And a lot of them are coming from Wasco. A lot of them are coming from Delano, North Kern, for those of you that don't know what that is. And they're coming from all these other prisons where, you know, that are formally active, or they're coming from Cal City because it's time for them to go to camp or anything like that. And as soon as these general population inmates come onto the facility, if they are active within their gang politics, they are to immediately engage in combat with an inmate on that facility, regardless of race. They're not supposed to be there. They're supposed to take off, get sent to ADSEG, and get sent to a general population prison, which there isn't that many of them left. I believe the only really real level 1 and 2 that remains in California is Cal City, I believe, and that's because it's an independent contracted prison, and they refuse to go 50-50 because they don't want to deal with the violence. And honestly, it's, to be honest, in my eyes, it's a bigger failure than the SNY program that we instilled way back in the day. I mean, I can't speak on that because I wasn't around when they started doing that, but it's created just a vacuum of violence, you know, like instead of having like a riot a year, maybe every other year when it was GP, you know, what we're having is, you know, possibly when we get intake on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, you're possibly potentially getting 60 inmates each of those days. And you're running the possibility of having 50% of that population that comes in take off. And where administration doesn't understand is, yeah, these inmates are taking off and coming off, but you have to understand that you're putting your officers in that kind of peril as well. Because before, when you'd have a riot, you'd have the ability to quell it from a distance, and you just throw grenades and, you know, you'd lay it down, and then you can go in through slowly and dissect it and pick it apart. Well, over here, the way the state wants us to house these NDPF inmates is that we're to bring them onto the facility one at a time, that we were to place them in their prospective household with NDPF population. And if they go in there and they fight, either it's a 1-on-1, 3-on-1, we have to go inside of there. And a lot of the times, more often than not, you're within your tolerated minimum distance to use your MK9 streamer because you're closer than 6 feet, and you're not going to lie about that on your report. So you transition to the next thing. You utilize your mononic expandable baton. You're going in there, you're throwing those strikes. If that's not effective, you transition to physical force strengths and holds. You take them to the ground. And I believe it's just putting a lot more wear and tear on these officers, because back then, when you would deal with a riot or, you know, any kind of, you know, little small problems or skirmishes on the yard, it would keep you at a safer distance. And now it's putting us in a closer proximity to these violent inmates. And we've seen it go up since, honestly, I've seen it, the amount of injured officers go up since the beginning. Like in 2016, 17, and 18, when I first started, you wouldn't even really hear about cops going out. And then once we flipped, man, on Facility A alone, I believe they had 5 cops go out, man. We had one cop blow out both of their knees, one tear their Achilles, another one, a bunch of fractures in their feet because they were rolling around with the inmate and they went down some stairs. Another one tore out his meniscus as an ACL. And I myself, as of April 25th, 2023, I finally injured myself substantially. I tore my rotator cuff. I tore my labrum. I have advanced cystic arthritis throughout my acromial joint, and I have what my doctor told me, a quarter-sized piece of torn cartilage just floating throughout my main shoulder joint. So that's what I'm getting ready to address and take care of now, and that's just my take on this whole, NDPF thing and how the department has kind of been evolving and not really evolving in my eyes, but honestly declining for the worse for custody staff, because now with the way the whole guys on the use of force is going, how they don't want us to do it, it raises the potential for possible litigation, because inmates can hurt themselves, and the worst thing that can happen is an inmate, gets hurt, dies. At the end of the day, that falls back on us, because it's our job to protect that inmate and make sure that, they have a good sanctity of life in that prison. It's technically what our job is. And with this whole NDPF program failure, what I like to call it, is only fostering that inevitable thing happen where, inmates are going to get hurt and someone's going to die, and then it's going to fall back on us, and then this whole program is just going to get destroyed, and they're going to have to throw the next experiment at us, but it just goes on to, not only that, with administration, coming after officers, you have to understand also too, like a lot of officers, like within now, I'm looking at paperwork that, some of my friends have sent me. And man, I can't imagine it. Like, I remember when I was first starting out and doing all this stuff.
Wait, hold up. Let's talk about that. What motivated you, Lonzo? What motivated you to become a correctional officer? Because that's not your average everyday job. You're not a kid. You're saying I want to grow up and be a correctional officer. A lot of times, if your parents are, you probably do. I know a couple of COs whose parents were, and they always wanted to be one themselves. But what motivated you to become a correctional officer?
I'll be honest, man. I didn't really care for. I never thought I would be one. Like, I grew up in my family. A lot of my family were on the opposite side of the law. And like they did a lot of bad things and stuff like that. And I started looking into it. Gosh, maybe like around when I was like 23, 24, because at that time I was a manager at a gym, and I had a lot of correctional staff that would come in and speak to me on like, their jobs and what they do. And I started like catching on to it. And I was like, man, dude, that sounds pretty cool. But that's not my thing. Like, my thing is, I'm a bit of a hustler, dude. I like sales. I like, getting my money based upon commission. But there was times where like, I like, no matter how good I could talk the talk and all that, there was times where just people weren't buying, because you know what? We live in a pretty bad economy at that time. And I was like, man, I need to find something different. So I transitioned over to banking, and I became a banker. And, I would see some of the, officers that I used to work with at the gym and stuff like that. And they come in there and they're like, dude, what are you doing at this bank, man? You need to sign up for the California Department of Corrections and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, whatever, I'm like, maybe one day, And so finally, I got involved in it, and someone came and they're like, hey, check this out, man. Look at this. And they showed me their check, and I was like, dang, that looks pretty nice. So I finally applied in 2015, July 27th, 2015. I went to the academy. And what was crazy, because at that time, the department changed again, and it went from a 16-week academy to a 12-week academy. And you can attest to this, man. I was the first class to do that 12-week academy, and man, it felt like pretty unorganized. I mean, I ain't gonna lie, the training was good, but I'll be honest, like, I felt like we were learning as the sergeants were learning, because it was their first time, doing it. But honestly, I really did it for the money. But once I hit the academy, and like I started hearing all these sergeants' backgrounds and everything they had gone through, like, I'm a really passionate person, and I believe like the niche that really like attracted me to it is creating that brotherhood with your partners, always having their back, always wanting to protect them, and always wanting to, lead them and be that example and go out there and, like, because our difference isn't made in what we do in the inmate's life, because they've made their mistakes, they've made their decisions on what they're going to do. Sometimes you might have a good conversation with one of them to calm them down to, hey, check this out. But I guarantee you a couple of days later, they're going to go back to being that same person they were when they had that internal conflict that you helped them talk them down to. But what I believe truly is the best part about it is the relationship and the family that you create with your partners, whether it be male, female, sergeants, lieutenants, captains, and so on. Because the one thing in our job, that we face every day is the potential for violence. And you always want to make sure that you're there for your partner, because at the end of the day, my motivation as an officer is to make sure that my partners go home in the same shape that they came in. And I think starting at Pelican Bay, that was the biggest attribution to that mindset, because I remember when I was in the academy and just before we were getting ready to graduate, people were like, oh yeah, OG cops and senior cops don't really talk to newer officers. They're not going to communicate with you. They're not going to trust you. They're not going to talk to you. And it was kind of an intimidating walking in that first day, because not only was I assigned to a RDO relief in Bravo 3, but Bravo 3 at that time was an EOP building. And out of everybody that I came in with, I was the only one that got put into EOP at that time. And when I got there, I remember it was just quiet in the office, and like no one really talked to me and all that. I had to sort the mail by myself and do this all by myself. And I was like, man, it is true. These dudes aren't gonna, deal with me at all, like at all. 30 minutes later it goes by, it's time for yard recall on that afternoon yard, and we're bringing it in. And I'm just standing there with my partner, and he was a veteran officer. This man had at least 22 years at that time. And he had spent most of his career, at least the last 10 years that he told me, in that building. And I was like, man, that's crazy, because it's active, like this is like a new cop spot from what I was told. And we're bringing in that first yard, and we're calling in B section. And all of a sudden I hear him, JD, he starts yelling, get down. And I look, and right there, 40 minutes into the first day of my career, we have a 2-on-1 happening right in front of me. And like, I just see him running, and like, it just, like, I was like, this isn't practice no more, man. There isn't going to be a proctor that's going to say hot, or reset, or, the scenario's over, like I just saw him running towards that, and I was like, man, I need to go that direction too. But the whole time he was running forward, I just saw him kept looking back at me and watching me. And I was like, through my mind is registering. I'm like, dang, this dude's making sure that I'm doing the right things, and I'm all right. And it really was like, okay, cool. This dude has my back, so we utilize force, we put down the incident. And I remember everybody comes up to me, they're like, all right, dude, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do this, you're going to do that. And I was like, dang, it's true, man. I'm on my own. And I remember one thing I was told is that if you have a question, ask. There's no such thing as a stupid question. The only one that's stupid is the one that you don't ask. And I remember I looked up to the lieutenant that was there at the time, and I looked at him. I was like, hey, check this out, man. I'm gonna need some help. And he snapped at me at first. He's like, you mean to tell me you haven't done this before? And I'm like, sir, this is my first day. And he looked at me and he was like, hey, I'm gonna get some people to help you. And right after that, a couple SNEs came to the building, helped me with my 837, helped me with the 115 that I was writing, helped me with the Barney chronos at that time, is what we called them. They were, man, I forgot their technical term, but it's a Barney chrono is a chrono two inmates sign when they agree to house with one another with that there's not going to be any issue. And I was like, man, dude, it felt good. And then after that, the staff in that building really started opening up to me a little bit more. They were talking to me a lot more, and I'm like, okay, cool. I must have done something right. Day goes on, it gets easier and easier, chatting it up. around 1830 hours. EOP inmates go to evening group. So we get them out, we send them to group. At 1930 hours, they come back because they have to take 2,000-hour meds. They start coming back down the track. An inmate goes off the track into the grass, picks up something off the ground, and stuffs it down his shirt. Uh, Gosh, this sergeant's no longer with the department. So Sergeant Brow goes over and tells me, he's like, "Hey, go search. I'm gonna search this guy." I was like, "All right, cool. I'll go with you." He starts patting him down, and all of a sudden, the inmate gets extremely tense. And the inmate, all of a sudden, inmate Rodriguez, I completely remember his name. This dude was truly EOP. This man was covered in scars. Like, just, he was really big on self mutilating himself. And he just immediately goes for his waistband. And I look at my sergeant, and he looks at me. He's like, "Dude, he has a weapon." And I was like, "Oh, man. Like, are you kidding me, dude? This is my first day on the job." And for a split second, I just did not know what to do. I was just like, "Man, this is crazy." The alarm's going off. Everybody's getting down. I look behind me. I put all the inmates behind me down, and I look up, and I finally grab this dude, and we're just kind of struggling with him up against the fence because we were up against the fence. And I look, and I see just JD come running up at us, and we just take this dude to the ground. And it's just a fight over controlling his hands, try to get that weapon and all that. And
And this is
all of
day
a
one.
sudden,
Day one.
this is day one, day one. And it was crazy. It was like the perfect storm. Like it was like truly baptism under fire. And I remember we're just wrestling around this dude, and all of a sudden you just start feeling a bunch of weight go on your back, and that's because all the other officers from the other buildings are starting to come and respond. We finally get the inmate teed out. Sergeant gets the weapon from him. Me and Officer JD, we put him place him in handcuffs, get him up on his feet and into the holding cell over there. And um, I remember the same lieutenant that had talked to me earlier, and he looks at me, he's like, "You're gonna need some help, huh?" I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "It got crazy." He's like, "All right." And so, man, later that night, a couple first watch cops came over and just helped me write my report and dial it in because it was a pretty intense report. Like first day, I utilized my non-like expandable baton earlier in that day. I had to learn how to write one of those reports, especially with the 2-on-1. It was like crazy because it's like it's the real deal now. And then later on that evening, you know, we have an inmate, you know, turning on a sergeant with a weapon, is what, we went with because he was trying to get at the weapon. He was trying to turn on my sergeant at the time. And man, it was just like one long night. I remember getting out of there like at 4 in the morning the next day because we were just like, we had just finished buttoning up the first reports like at 8 o'clock. They had finally gotten approved, and back then we were writing everything on 837s, and it was getting approved with pen and all that. So it took a little while to get things done. And then the 115s were done on paper and all that, the lockup orders and all that. So it took a while. Then all of a sudden, like at 8 o'clock, we had this other incident, and finally we start getting a schematic on everything, on what's involved, what we're going with the charges, to what we could write it with. And so around 10 o'clock, we finally start writing, and we're starting to get done with, reports and this and that. But, things don't line up, and, it's my first day. So they're over here they're pretty much teaching me how to make a fire, like bare hands, because it's like, this is the first time I've ever seen it. I've had to do it. But it was a great experience because, man, after that, like, it was a crazy circumstance, but it was a great experience because it definitely opened me up to open those officers up to my perspective. Because honestly, at the end of the day, they have to be able to trust you and know that they can to do your job. God forbid you have to do it, And it was a really trying first day, but I'm glad it happened because you know what? It really opened my partner's trust in me. And even though I worked a really busy unit that first 3 months, it was probably one of the best experiences I've had since I've been in the department because it taught me a lot. It taught me how to respond. I was working with very veteran officers at that time, uh, and they just really took me under their wing and just taught me a lot of what I know. And I'm truly grateful to it because I believe like if I hadn't started there in those first 3 months, it wouldn't have made me the officer that I am. Because there was times where, working that program, I was like, excuse me, there was times where I was working that program and I was like, man, dude, I don't know. Like, I'll be honest. Like, I was like, man, I don't know if I'm cut out for this, dude. I was like, we got these dudes holding the day room hostage all the time. I was like, we got these dudes fighting all the time. We got dudes that like, it was just insane. And literally. And I remember one day, my OG partner, JD, comes up to me and he tells me, he's like, hey, man, what's going on? And he's like, you're looking like you're having a hard time. I was like, dude, I ain't gonna lie. I don't know if I can do this. I'll be flat out to be honest with you. I was like, this is crazy. And he's like, you know what, man? He's like, you can. He's like, and I've seen you do it over the last 3 months. He's like, and I want you to know, man. He's like, you've done good. And he's like, and the one reason why you're going to be able to cut out for this is because you're always going to have a lot of partners that are going to have your back. And he's like, and I promise, as long as I'm yours, nothing's going to happen to you. And I was like, dang, like that was all I needed, and that's all I ever wanted to be too. I wanted to be that guy that just had his partner's back. And, I wanted to honestly throughout my career, the one thing that it's always been is putting my partners before myself, and like making sure that, like I said all the time, I want to make sure that you go home in the same way that you came in. And I don't care if that means that I don't have to, you know? And if you fast forward a couple years, I believe it was in 2017, I remember I was coming on the third watch at Sierra Conservation Center on Facility B. I walk into the office, and at that time, my lieutenant, who was a former was an officer at Pelican Bay, comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, dude, I need to talk to you." And I'm like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "Dude, it's bad." And I'm like, "Oh man!" I was like, "Am I gonna get fired or something? Am I gonna be under investigation? Something like that." And I remember my lieutenant pulled me into his office and he shows me this report. And I'm like, "What's going on?" And he's like, "Dude, a bunch of cops at Pelican Bay got attacked by a bunch of inmates today." And I'm like, "No." Like immediately my heart sank down in my chest, down in my stomach, actually. Sorry. And I'm looking at this little brief report that, 5 officers and a sergeant were attacked by 125 Southern Hispanics. And man, it just destroyed me because it started listing some of their injuries. That this officer had a broken orbital, this other officer had completely torn his shoulder. Another officer, sergeant that I hold near and dear to my heart, uh, broke part of his back, and another one that like suffered some severe concussions. And man, it was the worst thing ever because I remember when I left Pelican Bay, that sergeant told me, he's like, "Hey, remember one thing." He's like, "When you leave here and you meet your future partners," he's like, "remember," he's like, "never push them into battle, but lead them into war." And I believed in that, and I held on to that very, very near and dear to my heart. And when I found out that, man, all my other partners got attacked like that, and I wasn't there to take that beating that I felt that I had coming, it had destroyed me. And I just remember after that, like there wasn't a there wasn't an incident that I didn't try to spearhead. There wasn't an incident that I did try to put myself in front of because I wasn't gonna I wasn't gonna fail my current partners like I did my last. And I know I shouldn't feel bad about that. I know I shouldn't feel like I failed them, but I feel like I did because a part of me did want to stay at that prison. It's just like the politics happened, man. They were shutting down part of that facility. They were shutting down part of that prison, and they were going to start sending people to prisons that they couldn't fill. And I wasn't willing to go to a prison that I didn't want to go, so I went to a prison that was closer to home. And unfortunately, that calamity happened with those officers, and man, a lot of like I think out of the 7 or 8 that got attacked, 5 of them were medically retired due to it. And I just remember I just took that pain and I just was like, you know what, man, that's never going to happen to my partners either. And so I always put myself first. And even when it came to, Black South riots, I've been involved in the most of them at the current prison that I'm at. When we had the Bulldog Southsider incrementals that were going on for about a year, did that from the end of 2017 through the end of 2018, and as soon as we started integrating and flipping the prison for the non-designated programming facility, man, I just didn't let myself not get involved in anything. I would come in for overtimes for what they would have for disturbance control that would conduct the housings. On third watch, I would stay because that was my designated shift. And, even though we would get the buses in the morning where we were flipping the yard at night at the camps, inmates were refusing to work because the prison had flipped. And so then they'd bring on buses at, 6 or 7 in the evening, in the afternoon, and we'd be housing all the way up until like midnight that next day. I mean, I can't tell you how many 20-hour days that I took, but I would do it again any day of the week because of the promise that I made, that sergeant, that I'd always, lead my team and never push them, because, that's what mattered to me, is that they go home the same way that they came in, even if it means that I don't. And I know I say that a lot, but it's because I'm that passionate about it. I'm that passionate about making sure that, my partners are all right, that, that they're good and that they're okay, even if it meant, wrecking my body the way that I have, even if it meant, being diagnosed with severe work-induced PTSD. It's like, it's something we don't talk a lot about, and it's something that a lot of people don't understand. And I would, hear about, officers, you hear about the dark side of corrections, and you hear about like an officer that commits suicide. And
Yeah, we just
I
had
remember,
four LA County sheriffs commit suicide.
yes, I know. I saw that, and it's insane. It's extremely saddening. It's crazy because people just don't understand, because we don't talk about it, because I'll be honest, we're proud. We're prideful people. And I'll admit it. Like, when I first started and you hear about someone committing suicide, and I know this sounds bad, but you're like, dang, man, like, it hurts, but dude, why? What was the why? You're such a coward, And I know that sounds bad, but it's because we work in this environment that makes us so proud, because the environment is extremely a negative one because of what we're surrounded by and all that. And it honestly changes the way we think. But since I got hurt and I've been injured and I've been out and I've been waiting for surgery, I started noticing, like, when I first got hurt and I was out, I could never relax. Everything and anything got a reaction out of me. Like the ice falling in the ice machine, man, it triggered me, and I'd be up and I'd be looking around and I'm like, oh man. Or like I'd start having these moments where like I just couldn't breathe. And I was like, man, dude, like, like, what's going on with me? Like, it's because like, or my dog would jump up against the screen door and it makes that harsh metallic sound, and it reminded me of like a dorm fight. Or just even going out my garage and, looking down the sidewalk and seeing someone jog up the street, and you're like, oh crap, they're running at me. And like, it triggers you, man. And it's crazy because it's like, you're involved in it for so long and you're operating outside of what people call your tolerance threshold, that once you come out of it, that you don't know how to go back into it. You don't know how to turn down that, that heightened sense of alertness. You can't turn down, the defense mechanisms that you've created working in prison. Like, it's crazy because like people come up to greet me all the, like, if somebody comes up to greet me or anything like that, or if I find myself in a crowd, the one thing I'm doing is I'm looking at hands all day. I'm like, boom, 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 scanning, looking at hands, looking at their eye, like I'm over here looking at their pockets. And I'm like, dang, I find myself that I'm just like, stop, you're gonna like freak yourself out. And then someone comes up to you to say hi, and you're like, whoa, you're getting too close. And you're like, man, you don't have to say that. I'm not in prison, But
So the department
it
does have a lot of
create,
resources for mental health, and they have the Office of Employee Wellness, peer support program, right?
yeah, they do, but God, I'm not really too aware with, the whole EAP and all that program, because honestly, like, I didn't understand it until I was already out. So like I've been seeing because due to my due to the state of my injury and with my PTSD, I have an accumulative trauma package attached to my claim. So I'm working with pretty much a pretty much a state issued therapist, right?
Oh, you're out right now.
Yeah, I am. I've been out since April 25th of this year, 2023.
So a few months.
Yeah. And then I'll be honest, man, it's been like I was saying, it's been a very trying time because, there's times where I sit here and the silence is like it kills me. And I'm just like, just sitting here thinking in my head, like, here listening to everything that's going on around me and like responding to it. And that's hard because it's like I got a 4-year-old daughter, and like sometimes she'll creep up behind me to like, play with me. And I'll be honest, it scares me. Sometimes it gets a reaction out of me, and I'm just like, dang, that's crazy. Like I can't even fully enjoy the full presence of my child because there's a part of me that's on alert at all times. That sometimes they're like, I'll go to a family barbecue and someone will come from around me and like throw me in a little hug, and my first thing is like, man, I just want to freaking put hands on them, because you're attacking me, and that's what's crazy because it's like all these things that should bring you pleasure actually bring you pain. And um I'm not too, like I was saying, like when you were talking about the employee wellness and EAP and all that, honestly, it's like they only give you a certain amount of sessions from what I've been told. I think they say 4, or is it, I think it got up to 8, I believe. And you have peer support, which is like, people that are at work that are designated to talk to you. But I believe, man, with how, just from what I've understand, just from what I understood from the last few months of actually really truly going through like these mental difficulties and this physical pain, especially attached to it, because it just amplifies it because it's like you're wounded, so you can't protect yourself as good as you can. You can't respond to something as fast as you can. So your flight or fight reflex, to me, I believe, enhances because of the fact that I'm injured, and I refuse to take pain medications because I just believe that all they want to do is put pain meds down your throat. And I've met multiple officers that have gotten addicted to pain meds and no longer have jobs because of those addictions that they've gotten because of an injury. But I believe with what's going on with, the little EAP and peer support, I mean, it's like I'll be honest, I believe it's not sufficient. It's like putting a band-aid on a bullet wound, like you might slow down the bleeding, but at the end of the day, you're, like I said, it's like putting a band-aid on a bullet wound. You're going to bleed out because
I
eight
think I
eight
think
section.
the department has put these programs in place for a what is this, CYA aspect.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
uh, I do appreciate the peer support program. We have a lot of good people who are peers who participate in the peer support program, and we have a lot of people who
Hmm.
are bad at the peer support program. So that should be looked at. But a lot of this
Oh,
stuff
for
is
sure.
CYA. They're just covering themselves.
Oh, for sure. They just want to say that there's something in place just in case someone kills themselves. They're like, oh, well, we have these programs, which is sad, because I honestly truly believe that there should be like more programs and more aid for that mental health part because, man, I'll be honest, it's a meat grinder for our mental health, the prison system. Because first and foremost, your clientele hates you, which is the inmates, because, you know, they're not supposed to be in prison. You're there to oppress them. And with a lot of the policies and procedures that are changing that are swinging in their favor, they're technically putting the handcuffs on us. So now they're starting to feel empowered you know, by our own agency because they keep creating policies that swing in their favor and pretty much taking the power of authority that we have. Like now I
I,
believe,
I want to touch on the
I'm
peer
sorry,
support. I want to touch on the peer support thing real quick. And
go
I
ahead.
said some of them are bad. I'll give you an example of one time. Uh, we had a murder at DVI, and
Hmm.
one of the officers that was in this unit with this where this murder occurred, he was physically shook, right?
Yeah,
And there was
definitely.
nobody's peer support. It was his first week on the job. He has a murder in his unit, right? So I reached out to
Wow.
peer support for him. I was like, hey, this officer looked kind of shook. You know, it's his first week on the job. And the peer support person I reached out to was a lieutenant at the time. He's like, well, do you think he's going to talk to me? I was like, what do you mean? You know, I'm letting you know that he looks shook. It's his first week on the job. He's like, well,
Yeah.
you know, can you call him and ask him if he'll talk to me? I was like, dude, I'm just asking you to reach out to him, make sure he's okay. You know what is the point of having you here as a peer support and you're a lieutenant? I'm telling you, I'm his partner. You know, he looks shook. I'm letting you
Oh, for
know.
sure.
Maybe you should reach out to him, talk to him. You know,
And they're supposed to.
so
And they're supposed to.
that's an example of
That's from.
when I say there's some
Oh
good,
yeah.
some are bad.
Oh, definitely. We have a lot of good people on our peer support. Our peer support team, but the one that manages it is horrible at it because it's an AW that really loves to come after cops. So it's like if you're having a hard time with your mental health or all that, are you going to really reach out to a peer support program that's ran by someone that makes their living on burning cops? So it's like it makes you not even. I'll be honest, it makes you not even want to reach out because you're like, man, that's her team. I don't want nothing to do with it. And that's why I didn't, because honestly, before I even got hurt and I found out about this, I've been partaking in therapy weekly for pretty much the last 4 years. And I think it's because like I've been like before I got hurt, it was just always at such a high level of alertness, and always getting ready to go back in there and handle business with the housing and the great integration and all the incidents. Like I never let myself feel, you know, any of the effects of what was going on with not only physically my body, because through my MRIs that I've been taking, there's a lot of substantiated injuries that have happened to me over the few years, and but it's because you have that. I'll be honest, in the academy they trained us. Like one thing that we heard all the time is that warrior mindset, and it's like you can't let. And then not only having that, but the desire to like the fear of letting your partners down, like you're like, no, I'm going in. It doesn't matter if I'm jacked up. It doesn't matter if my back hurts. It doesn't matter if my knee hurts, my wrist. Like I'm gonna go in there, and it just keeps adding up, and it just keeps hurting and hurting, and like not only that, but then just always constantly seeing violence and seeing it happen. You see the people getting hurt, and you see all the beatings that people are getting, stabbings here and there. Honestly, too, like one thing that we're seeing a lot more now is fentanyl overdoses, and man, like those are extreme. Like either they're just out on the ground, passed out. You wake up and they throw up on you, or sometimes when you're Narcanning them, sometimes they come out of it and they're extremely violent, and it turns into some big old dog pile, and you're fighting to get control of this inmate. And
Yep, you're over here. Yeah,
it's
the Narcan thing is there's a lot of Narcan in prison right now because of these guys overdosing so much on fentanyl,
oh, for sure,
right? And then
it's
when
through
you
the
Narcan them, they wake up, they want to fight because they don't know where they're at, they don't know what happened, So you're trying to save this dude, and he's over here about to kick your ass. That's another thing.
oh, for sure, it's insane. And then like I remember me and one of my partners, we rolled up on an overdose. They were screaming for a man down, and this and that. And it was on my Thursday, and I remember I looked at my partner. I'm like, "Hey, dude, you down to go in there, just me and you?" Because this dorm was going crazy. They're like, "Man down, man down, man down. We need someone in here right now." So we go in there, and this dude's just covered in puke. He's out on the ground, and so hit the horn. Hey, Central Control, be advised. I need a Code 3 medical response to report to this dorm. I need to activate 911. Also, we have an unresponsive inmate, possible overdose. Inmate does have a pulse, but is unresponsive at this time. And boom, we activate everything. We're getting on this dude. We're trying to wake him up. He was a big dude, and he was just like jiggling around like Jello, man. Like there was no response out of him at all. He did have a faint pulse. Nurses come in, they start Narcanning him, hitting him. I think they hit him with 5, and he finally comes out of it, and he's just freaking out, puking everywhere, and it's like all over my boots and my pants. And I was just like, dang, man, this is crazy. They get him out of there, they get him on the tarp, down the stairs, they get him into an ambulance, and he's off to, whatever hospital they sent him. But it was wild because the very next day he's back on the yard. And like he comes up And dude, he was mad because he was going off on me because somewhere in the transition between him being transported to the hospital and being brought back to the prison, they lost his reception shoes. And this dude was cussing at me, going off at me. And I looked at him and I was like, hey, man, I was like, I'm sorry about your shoes. I was like, how about you say thank you for saving your fucking life, you know? And he just walked off, you know, and like, I ended up getting him some more shoes. And I was like, dude, check this out, man. I was like, you get a lot more, you know, I was like, you're gonna attract a lot more bees with honey than vinegar, dude. I was like, one thing, I don't have to give you these shoes. I was like, I'm giving them to you because you know what? Yeah, they fucked up and lost your shoes. I was like, but you know what? You technically didn't have these coming. I was like, but you can have these. I was like, but next time, I was like, remember. I was like, remember those that do for you, dude. I was like, because if not, if it wasn't for me and my partner going in there by ourselves without the appropriate staff, I was like, you'd probably be dead. And he just shook his head and walked away. And it's just crazy because that's another thing that just attributes to, you know, the attack on your mental health because you're over here doing all that you can to preserve someone's life that just does not, for lack of a better term, give a shit about you. You know, like, and honestly, they hate you. You know, because
Yep.
because not only do you have to go in there and clean up that whole mess, obviously there's drugs in that dorm. So we go in there and we search the whole thing up and down. We don't find anything. And now the rest of the population in that dorm is mad at you. Well, guess what, man? You put us in a position to have to come in here and do this job. And now they're mad at you, angry at you, cussing at you because this is gone, this is gone, this is gone. Well, like, you're not supposed to have it, you know? Don't give us a reason to come in here. I was like, you gave us one because you know what? You had some dude OD in here. So now we have to really come in here and look for drugs and anything like that. And it's just a vicious cycle, you know, because then you're going to deal with that. And then the next day, you got a bus coming with 30 inmates, 15 of them fight. You hit like 12 of them, and you go home and you're just beat down from the week. And then you're off for 2 days, which isn't enough if you're not swapping. And if you are swapping, you're exhausted because, you know, both shifts can be that hectic, you
Absolutely.
know? And then the first 2 days feel like you're barely coming out of it, you know, like, when we first started flipping the yard, I had just had my daughter.
So let's talk about that. So
And
they deemed it necessary that there's no more SNY, there's no more GP, right?
yes,
They said SNY program is a failure, which is one of many programs that are a failure that the department starts because there are so many programs that are a failure that the department starts. But they said no
definitely.
more SNY. We're gonna put these guys from SNY back into the GP yard, and we're gonna call it a non-designated yard, right?
Yes,
And for the most part, where you're at, so these guys are straight gang members, right? And they're
definitely.
putting them onto these yards, right?
Yes.
What are their orders from the prison that they're coming from when they say you're going to an ND yard, non-designated programming, right? What is it called?
Yeah, they'll tell them.
NDP,
It's NDPF,
NDPF,
and it's
non-designated
crazy.
programming facility. So they get
Yes,
orders,
sir.
right? You're not supposed to go there. Make sure you come back, right?
For sure.
And then what happens when you put these guys on these yards?
They go in there, and if there's yards out, they'll immediately charge the first person that's in their sight and start attacking them. Or if we get them inside the dorm, they start attacking people that are inside their dorms. We have intake dorms specifically set up to kind of control and contain the incidents, and that's the section that I work in. So what we'll do is that, all right, Wasco's bringing over 20 GPs and 12 SNYs. What we'll do is that we'll put the 12 SNYs in the dorm first, and then we just start feeding a GP in there one at a time. And if there's yard out, sometimes they make it and they take off on the yard, or sometimes they'll get inside the dorm and take off on the inmates in the dorm. But it's nonstop, you know. It's like, okay. And then not only that, but you look at these inmate profiles and they say they don't agree with the non-designated programming facility. They don't agree with that, with the program. So right there's a telltale sign that, oh, that inmate's probably going to fight, and they do. Well, my thing is that if you know these inmates don't agree with that program and they're probably going to commit violence when they get there, why are you sending them there in the first place? Because all it's doing is that it's creating injuries. It's creating a ton of incidents that are affecting program. And not only that, it's creating injuries among staff, and it's been through the roof. Like there's so many cops that are out because they've been injured because of these incidents. And I was like, I'm never going to be one of them, and now I am one of them, and I'm like, dang man, like when is this going to stop? Because it's going to keep hurting people, and it's who knows what can happen. And I just believe, that it's like before our time, how they had the whole Corcoran and the cork and shoe gladiator fights that they were saying that they were hosting. It feels like that because we know that these inmates are going to fight. They're coming onto the yard. They have their flip flops on, but their socks are pulled up over them. They have their jumpsuits tied to them. Um, and it's just all there. They say that they're going to fight, and like it feels like our hands are being tied in it. It's like, dang, like we are legitimately setting up fights. And like we have to, but it's like, oh, we're not. We're just giving everybody the chance to program because maybe they'll change their mind when they hit the yard. But it's like, dude, they're telling you that they're not going to. They're like, oh, do you want us to give you your property to take out there? They're like, no, I'll be back. They're telling R&R cops that. They're like, oh, you're supposed to take your property. He's like, no, I'll be back.
That's the receiving and release cops, right?
Yes. And it's like, there's all the telltale signs there that should tell you that, you're not supposed to be there. Because back in the day, when we first did the flip, if an inmate said that they were going to go out there and fight, we would just lock them up in ADSEG. Well, it got to the point that, we couldn't lock them up based on behavior, which could lead to violence. So they would kick them back out and they'd fight anyways. They have to give forward the chance to program. And not only that, but their gang politics are stating that they have to go out there, they have to fight, and force has to be used. And that's why a lot of the times these dudes don't get down, or, you'll tell them because their paperwork has to look good when they get to ADSEG. And by paperwork, I mean their 114D, their lockup order stating why they're being taken off of the facility. It has to show that they attacked somebody. It has to show that force was used on them, because it's what keeps them in the good graces of their gangs. And we know this, and we're still doing it. And it's like, it's failed over and over again. And I believe like the reason why they're preaching to us so much to not use force, to not, put hands on these dudes and all this and that, is because of the fact that if an inmate goes to a facility and takes off and no force is used, obviously there's not an incident package. So that makes it a non-reportable incident and doesn't have to get sent up to Sacramento. It's just some dude that failed the program. But if you use force, it gets sent up to Sacramento saying, hey, we had an incident, force was used, and it looks bad. I mean, this came straight from a captain who's now AW's mouth. I don't think he should have told me this, but he's like, hey, it looks bad on the prison, man. He's like, so we need you guys to slow down. And I mean, how can you tell me how? Like my job is to make sure that these dudes aren't hurt. And then they sent over the medical lieutenant at one point in time. They're like, well, yeah, our job is to prevent serious bodily injury from occurring, but these dudes don't have injuries on them. They just have baton marks on them. And I'm like, well, that means I did my job then, because I prevented serious bodily injury from happening, and I've always been the type of person that I'm going to defend my job and what I swore to do. It doesn't matter what somebody's political views are. It doesn't matter what the vision of the department or the vision of the prison is. I'm sworn to uphold my policies and procedures that are set before me. And not only that, but uphold the laws of the Constitution and preserve the sanctity of life. If that means that I have to go in there and use force, I'm going to, And as time goes on and you're constantly being fed these incidents and things go on, you're going to adapt, and your OODA loop is going to speed up to, these incidences where you can actually go in there and observe your imminent threat a lot faster than you could before when you did start, So what it looks like, us using force a lot faster, it's just because we're able to read it quicker and break it down quicker and act quicker. And when they see that, they're like, well, no, that's out of compliance and this and that. When they go off of video footage, which where they're not supposed to, a lot more cases, from what I've been told, the cases for incident report suspensions has gone up 75%. And what that means is when your incident report has been suspended, it means it's being sent up to review for potential OIA investigation. And what I'm being told is that, there's like 75% more people going under the mic now than there ever was years before. And I honestly believe it's truly a scare tactic from the administration trying to, let people know, like, well, check this out, dude. You know what? If you use too much force, you can go into the mic or do this, and that. I know a lot of officers are afraid of, these all new advanced camera systems that are coming into the prisons, or not only that, but the body cams that we're going to start wearing here soon. And they're using it like, oh, remember, when your incidents are happening, you're potentially, going to get caught up on, camera and stuff like that. And it's totally not true, because the thing about cameras, honestly, from what I've been told, it honestly potentially aids you more than it hurts you. Yeah, you have to be wearing it, and yeah, you feel like you're under the mic all the time, but at the same time, it does help, because, man, the inmate grievance, I guess, like, the department is seeing like such a rise in grievances that it's up like 85%. So they're trying to cut back on the abusive misconduct on the inmates' parts, and not only that, but like on our parts as well, But honestly, when they're using it to threaten cops about incidents and stuff like that, it should honestly not bother you at all if you're truly doing your job the way you're supposed to do it at all.
Here's my thing about the body cameras. I think the body cameras are a bad idea, and I'll tell you exactly why they're a bad idea. If you're if you are wearing a body camera, right, and you're trying to build rapport, that is gone now. No inmate is going to be able. You're not going to be able to build rapport with inmates anymore.
Yeah, definitely.
That is gone.
You never will be able to. Oh, for sure, because you're not going to be able to go up to somebody and clean up an in-house issue with a body camera on, And then not only that, but it's only a matter of time before, like, I don't know, if you go into a dorm setting, sometimes when you do counts, you go in through the back doors and stuff like that. If you have that body camera on and you catch someone coming out the bathroom or in the shower and they're naked or something like that, you have a potential for a grievance right there. It's a violation of privacy. So it's a double-edged sword. But like when it comes down to, administration telling you it's going to be a way for them to catch you if you're wrong on the uses of force, it couldn't be further from the truth. Because at the end of the day, when it comes down to your use of force and responding to an alarm, governing body, and this is straight out of Connor versus Graham, and it's a very important law that every person that wears a badge should know. And it says that the force should be reviewed from the perspective of the reasonable officer. And that's what vexes me so much, because you hear lieutenants and sergeants, but remember, the cameras are always watching, and this and that. Well, yeah, that's true. But at the same time, if you're doing your job right and you're operating within objective reasonableness, which is another part of Connor versus Graham, that report, as long as it corroborates with what they see on film and what happens throughout the totality of the incident, you should be well and clear. But now a lot of people that are in reviewing positions that have never been, correctional officers, or haven't been within the line in so much time, they're getting into these positions, and I believe they're truly abusing their power, because they're going off, like, even in some of the memos from some of the adverse action that I face, it says that, oh, through the video, and I could observe what this officer really did. Well, you're out of compliance right there already, because you know what? You're supposed to judge my use of force, from my opinion, without the aid of 2020 hindsight or technology going frame by frame through a video. You have to understand that, if you're in a certain situation that, the incident and the way it flows is constantly evolving, and we have to adjust our time and tactics to that. And as long as there's objective reasonableness, you should always be cleared on your use of force. Is there ones that are bad? Yeah, they are. But I believe within the way the department is going, the way that, all this whole, you know, verbal de-escalation, verbal judo and all that, which does help in some certain situations. But when it comes to inmates that are in a fight or flight situation, when it comes to life or death, they're not going to have an ability to understand. You know, you have to go in there and you need to, you know, do your job and make it happen and stop that fight, because at the end of the day, you're facing more. You're putting yourself in the ability to lose more if you don't stop that fight than if you do stop that fight. Because if you do, and God forbid you're wrong, and you do use force and you catch an unreasonable use of force or anything like that, on the disciplinary matrix, it does start at a 3, and that's 1123 LOI, and it goes up to a 6, which you can lose 5% up to 12 months. But if you don't do your job, someone gets knocked out and they bounce their head off the concrete and they die, you're looking at negligence of duties, and you're facing, you know, being fired, civil suits from, you know, the deceased party. You're you can lose your, like I said, lose your job, and you can face criminal charges. So, like I said, I would always put my position to act and defend myself in my actions rather than not act and 8 months later know that I have nothing left.
Right, right, right. Got some interesting stuff, man. So Connor versus Graham.
Um,
So I'll give you an example of one of the body cam. We had an officer where I work, and they had an incident. Right. This is during COVID
do you guys
times.
have body cams already there?
No. So this is during the
Okay.
COVID times, and they were going off these new AVS systems, audio videos. I don't know what they're called, but they had an incident. Somebody reviewed the footage from the incident. Right. Everything was fine. Use of force was fine. But they ended up booking one of the responding staff for not having a mask on, right? When we all were required to wear masks, right? And so
Yes.
they were like, what? He was like, nah, I was wearing a mask. So the union fought it, right? Which is another thing that we need to talk about, because something's going on with the union. But the union appealed it,
sure.
right? And they watched the tape again. They rewound it further, and he was eating lunch in the officer station seconds before he responded. So they were like, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay, never mind. We're not going to write you up. You're not getting booked for that." So that's crazy, man. These video cameras, and yeah, like you said, there's a lot of people who've never been COs. They're not law enforcement at all. They're reviewing these cameras and they're booking people, man. It's crazy.
Oh yeah, it's absurd. Like, we don't have none of the new ABS programs. Actually, they're installing them out of my prison now. But I remember when the COVID whole thing was going on. I remember, I think it was like 2020, and we had just started feeding in chow halls again. Well, we were told as long as we were outside, we didn't have to wear a mask, and as long as we were social distancing, we were fine. But as soon as we went indoors, we had to wear one. So we're sitting there, we're observing chow, we're watching the yard as everything's going on, and all of a sudden we just hear on the radio, "Hey, we got a 2-on-1 chow hall." I think it was chow hall 2, and we've just turned tail and bolted inside of the chow hall. Inmates got down on their own, didn't need to use force or anything like that. Well, what happened was a couple weeks later, I get called into my lieutenant's office. They're like, "Hey, we need you to sign this 1123 in this OJT." And I'm like, "What the heck happened?" They're like, "Oh, on that incident in the chow hall." I was like, "Dude, I didn't even do nothing. I just ran up in there and did something. I just ran up there and did nothing, you know, like, because it was done when I got there. They were already cuffing the dudes up and getting them outside of the chow hall." And they're like, "You ran in there without a mask." And I was like, wow. Like, I hear an
Yeah.
alarm going off, and my job is to respond to that alarm, you know? And that's been my whole mentality and everybody's mentality for the last 7 years at that time. And I'm like, man, they're really gonna hit me with that mask on that camera. And then I asked them, I was like, "Dude, I thought we couldn't." They were like, "Oh, we can't get you in trouble over cameras and this and that." And they're like, "Well, the reason why they caught it is because there was an actual incident and the misconduct was caught on video in observance of the incident." And I was like, "Oh my gosh, dude. Well, they gave us an 1123,
What's an
and a
1123?
week. It's pretty much just a verbal warning. You know what I'm saying? Verbal. 1123 and LOI are the same, except an LOI stays on your record for just a little bit longer. Well, a couple weeks go by, and then lieutenant comes in. They're like, "Oh, they don't want to do an 1123. They want an LOI." I was like, "Well, check this out, dude." I was all like, "Well, you need to tell the AW that wants to, up this level of discipline." Technically, I was like, that we were already given discipline, and it's supposed to be a closed issue. Well, we got the union involved, and they're like, "Dude, it's just an LOI. We don't want to fight it. We don't want to just make a big old deal out of nothing." But I honestly think it's like, we operate on the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And I believe that like the union operates on the spirit of it. And the administration is directly letter of the law. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, well, dude, check this out. Like, what are you even here for then? That's not supposed to happen. I was already given, discipline on that. This is considered double jeopardy, and it's not supposed to happen. And so they're like, "Oh, no, they'll just take the 1123 off of your file, and in 6 months, they said they'll take the LOI out." So I was like, "You know what, dude, forget it." Signed it, it went away, But it's like, it's kind of annoying because, like, you have this union that's supposed to keep the administration in check, but they don't want to. Because it sounds bad, because I know it sounds bad, but I believe the union is there to serve a purpose, but at the same time, they don't want to, cause too much, they don't want to, get into it with administration too much, because a lot of those union jobs, when they get elected into those union positions, they'll get super seniority, and they'll put themselves in whatever jobs they want throughout the prison, or whatever watch. They'll have all the Saturday, Sunday holiday jobs sewn up and all that. And then when, let's say, a staffing package has to get changed, or, they have to do an amendment to, like I said, the staffing package, where jobs get changed, days off get changed, they make those little silent deals within the administration that doesn't get their jobs touched. And I've seen it, and like, I get it, like, you don't want to kick up too much fuss, because when they want to change something, you don't want to have been caused such a problem in the eyes of an administration that they're going to alter your job when they do, instead of you being passive and then being like, "All right, you know what, check this out. We won't cause a grievance to this if you don't touch the job later down the line." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And it's like, I just believe it's a lot of those under the table shady deals that really are just, I'll be honest, man, next to the legal team, I love the legal team at CCPOA, man. They saved me. They saved me a lot of money. They got me out of a lot of really bad jam with my prison, a really corrupt jam with my prison. But I believe at the prison levels, man, it's a real joke. And honestly, at the executive board as well, because it's like, we get these contracts, and you see, like, we get 3%, and it's like, dang, really, man? You're hearing CHP's getting like 10, the nurses boards, they're getting like 20,
Yep.
education getting huge bumps. And I'm like, I know we make more than them, but man, we put up with a lot more too. And we're getting only 3%, and you're gonna give us a mental health bonus that we haven't gotten yet. But
Let's talk about that, because they're the state's they're in breach of contract right now, right?
definitely, I gotta hold on. I'll look at this little thing right here, and I believe I sent you earlier. But from what, so 2023 to 2025 MOU highlights. It's a 2-year term, expires July 2nd, 2025. Salary, a total salary increase, 6%, 3%. As of July 21st, 2023, 3%. As of July 1st, 2024, bargaining unit at 6, which is us. And on top of that, GSI increases 1%, contributions to a savings plus account for each BU6 member. So for those, I guess those are the GSIs for like retired officers or something like that. But this is where it's bad. We get mental health incentive. And it says in the first year of the contract, a $1,200 payment will be distributed to all bargain unit 6 members in a pay status as of November 1st, 2023 to support individual improvement in mental health and wellness. Well, we're on November 15th, 2023,
It is November
and
15th.
we still have not received that mental health bonus. And you know what? It's whatever. But if you guys are going to increase my union dues and start taking them out immediately, okay, take your money. But you know what? Give me the one that was promised as well. And then not only that, but not only are you taking your money from us, but you're buying $2.8 million properties with it,
Absolutely.
you know? And you're not giving me, you guys are over here dumping millions, but you're not going to give me my pennies when it's said I'm guaranteed it.
And they're all
But you're
COs.
going to be oh, for sure. And it's like,
They're all just regular correctional officers. They're not anybody special. They sit up there with their suits, and they have headquarters. They have those glass lockers with their uniforms in them that they never wear.
trust me, I've spent enough time going up fighting my use of force case. I've seen that. I've seen that building quite often, and I know it. And it's like,
You signed in on that logbook?
yes, I have. I've had to for go to the state personnel board to overturn unnecessary use of force beef that I caught back in 2022. But yeah, back to the union. Yeah, man, it's like they're over here dumping all this money on properties. Like they bought that $2.8 million home for I believe Staley, and then wasn't it like a couple years ago where they
Yes,
bought
for
like
Staley.
yeah, and then they got like a $1 million, like a $1.2 million. What was that other property they bought a couple years ago? That was out. That had that horse ranch on it, and it's like, what are you doing with our money, man? You know, like where's it going to? You know, I see some of it on the legal aspect because during my case they brought in a use of force expert that the union pays for. You know, um, and that's about it. You know, but also they pay those attorneys a lot of money to fight our cases. But and I see that's where it's a good thing because I ain't gonna lie, I'll be honest, I've met a couple of lawyers over there and they're amazing. So I encourage anybody, if you're going through any kind of litigation, if you're facing any beef, do not settle at the prison's level. Do not go in there with a union member for them to negotiate your skelly or anything like that. Once they hit you with the punishment, look at it, ask, always take a lawyer if you're looking at facing losing money. Always. Um, and see what they're going to offer you. This is not. Go in there with the union guy, have them talk to the ERO, and be like, hey, are they willing to wiggle on this and that? But oh, they're willing to wiggle a little bit, or they're willing to wiggle or not. But you know what? If you feel truly cold-hearted, like in your heart that you were right about your case, I'll take it to the state personnel board all the time because more often than not, the state loses about 85% of its cases in the state personnel board because I'll be honest, man, the state is very out of pocket. You know, a lot of ego goes into the punishments that they give out. And trust me, I saw it firsthand in my case. And I had an amazing lawyer. He taught me a lot about case law and, you know, policies that are not just through, you know, the DOM and what we were trained on, but also stuff that comes from the Supreme Court. And I know we were told all the time that at the prisons, like, oh, remember, do these lawsuits that go up against us and this and that. Well, there's a lot of them that go in our favor as well. Always. So like I said, look into Connor, like anybody's out there that's out there that, you know, that needs some good things to look into. I would definitely be Connor versus Graham, the Reasonable Responders Act. Definitely look into the Peace Officers Bill of Rights because that's one that really directly affects us as well. To protect yourself because I believe that administration, supervisors, you know, they really do make a, you know, get their living off of like, I'm not saying that they're all bad, but there's a good percentage of them that just, you know, make their days off of pushing around cops and just thinking that they can just tell them what to do and thinking that they absolutely need to, you know, because as sworn peace officers, we're allowed to perform the scope of our duties without outside influence. And that's directly out of Connor versus Graham and the Reasonable Responders Act. You know, so when you have a sergeant or a lieutenant or something telling you that you need to go here, you need to go there, be like, you know what, check this out. This is my assigned beat area. You know, if there's not a workload impact involved, you know what, you technically can't tell me to do that. And if they want to try to get you for insubordination or anything like that, go ahead. You know what? I'll take that beef every day because I'm not wrong. I'm right. And honestly, is it going to make your work life a little bit more of a hard time? Yeah, it will, because you know what? You're fighting the state, but at the same time, if nobody checks these dudes, no one else will, and it's only going to get worse for the rest of the officers that are there, and they're going to continue to abuse their authority, you know, and especially with, you know, when it comes down to it, like if you get in trouble, you have a union that doesn't want to fight any. You have a union that doesn't want to fight anything. Like they were trying to tell me, oh, just take it, just take the loss, just take the loss, and I finally was just like, dude, hell no. I called a lawyer, and that dude's like, dude, we're gonna win this. And I went to court for 2 days. I testified myself for 2 hours and 45 minutes, and it was worth it, you know, because you know what? They were telling me, oh, you're not going to beat this case. We're going to set an example. We're going to set precedents that, you know, misconduct can't be, you know, tolerated and this and that. But I'm like, dude, there's no misconduct. You know, I used force, and you guys are trying to say that, observed that I was out of compliance when it's just totally against policy. And not only that, but the AW that sent me up to OIA 2 weeks before she sent me up to OIA, she said that I had a good use of force and then changed her mind. Which she changed her mind, but in her findings said that I was still in compliance. So you have a case of falsifying state documents, which is what? A 9 on the matrix. It's subject for dismissal, and that person is still there, and I beat it in court. Oh, I get mad talking about it, but it's just crazy because you have a administration that'll rake you through the coals and a union that tells you, hey, it's not that bad, you know, but in reality it is. And I just want to encourage, you know, anybody that listens to this, anybody that can take anything from this, if you are faced with anything like that, always fight it, because you'll be surprised. They told me you're going to lose 5% for 12 months. That's it. That's the best deal you're going to get. We're not going to lower it. So I was like, all right, whatever. I'll take you to SPV. 2 weeks before SPV, hey, would you take 5 for 8? I'm like, I thought I wasn't going to get a better deal. No, heck no. I'm taking it to SPV. 3 days, like 7 days before trial. Hey, you've already done 4 months at, you know, 5 for 12. We'll knock it down to 6. I was like, nah, I'm not doing that. You know, I'm cool. I'm taking it to trial. Well, 2 days before trial, the captain calls me and they're like, hey, dude, you know, I was already out injured at this point in time. They're like, hey, man, we heard you've been having a hard time, and, you know, how bad your shoulder is and how it's affecting your mental health. And I was like pretty happy about it. And I was like, man, dude, this homie cares. You know what I'm saying? But then then all of a sudden the script kind of changed. I was like, yeah, man, it's been rough. And he's like, yeah, don't you think you should like take a load off of yourself and take a deal and, you know, take time served? And I was just like, nah, man, I'll see you in court. And I hung up. Like, how are you going to tell me you have such a strong case against me, and then like within a matter of days and weeks before trial, you're trying to make a deal with me? So I was like, there's no way I'm going to take time served, because you know what, at the end of the day, it says that I'm wrong. I know what I'm doing. I'm very experienced in what I do. You know, I've been involved in enough uses of force to understand whether I know if I'm good or if I'm not. And to be honest, I've never in any of the incidents that I've been involved in have I ever felt like I was wrong, because I've just have that amount of experience. You know, like if I look back at it, when I was going through my trial, I went through all my 837s. I went through all of Psalms. I tallied up everything. I have over 350 incidents that have required the use of force, and I have over 400 uses of force. I was like, in all these years, they finally decide like, oh, one's wrong. You know, it's like, and they go in there and not even decide that it's wrong. They said that it was right. The hiring authority said that that person needs to look into it more. She changes her mind and then sends me to OIA. Even in my OIA investigation, I was getting props from the OIA investigators when they were looking at the video. They're like, man, that was a perfect throw. They're like, man, you should try for the Chiefs, because that throw was like Patrick Mahomes. And all this is being said on the record. And at the end of it, I remember one of the special agents even told me, he's like, man, that throw was money, man. And I mean, regardless, with that all out, it's like everything that I'm seeing, everything that I'm doing, I know it's right because nothing's changed from what I said in my report, what shows on that video, and what went down in that OIA review. You know, what they're looking for is is there any difference within the cooperation of your incident to the what's said on that, what's seen on that camera, and what's said in that interview. If anything makes a difference, or if there's any changes, that's when they start looking into things and they start deciding whether, hey man, this dude's wrong or right then and there. And nothing ever changed on my end, but they still came after me for 5% for 12. I went to Skelly, showed them everything, busted them down, Connor versus Graham and everything. A week later, ERO calls me in. They're like, hey, we don't want to budge. So, you know what? I advise everybody, the worst thing you could ever do is have a union rep go in there and negotiate your punishment, because you know what? Their negotiation skills only go as far as the rapport they have with that ERO. Always go make sure you have a lawyer present with you, because they're going to make sure if you are wrong, they're going to negotiate it down in terms to, you know, the letter of the law, what was going on, and based upon, you know, your experience and if you've been in that kind of trouble before. So you'll get a better deal even if you're wrong going through your attorney, rather than you would a union rep. Because at the end of the day, a union rep, they'll go in there and they're like, hey, you know what? I'll be honest, I've heard it this way myself from a union rep. Hey, save this dude, you can have the next dude. I've heard it. And it's like, damn, man, it's cutthroat. You know what I'm saying? And it's crazy. And it's like, it kind of makes you question like what they're there for in the first place anyways, if they're not really fighting for us, you know. And it just shows it within our new contract, you know, 6% over 2 years, but then you're going to buy a $2.8 million home. Like, like, if all honesty, you should give that money back to the people, bro. You know what I'm saying? It's
What
like,
about the convention? You ever been to one of the conventions? The CCPOA convention?
I refuse to go to those.
You know,
It's just, honestly, people will sit in those little seminars for like half an hour and then party for 12. I'm not about it.
it's a waste of money. You know, all their
Oh, for
spending is
sure.
secret. All their spending is secret. They don't tell anybody how much they spend. One guy broke out in 2017, and he had the numbers from 2017. They spent the 2017 convention was $1.1 million.
Are you kidding me?
No,
Oh my gosh, that's insane.
they spent
Wow.
the coffee service for 2 days was $50,000.
Wow. That's crazy. I had never heard of that.
Board meeting coffee breaks $5,000. Board meeting luncheon $8,000. Convention banquet event $130,000. Catering $363,000. Meeting enhancements $200,000. This guy just broke it down. He's from the Crescent City Times, 2017. So
no way.
So in today's money, it'd
Man.
probably be everything's
it'd
higher.
be double that.
Yeah, it's probably close to 2 million at least.
Oh, it'd be, because honestly, that whole convention is for everybody to sit around and tug each other off. In my eyes, you know, they
Get
go
drunk.
around, they just share. Oh, for sure, they go around, they spread all their stupid stories. Honestly, if there is one thing that, like, I was told by my lawyer, the only good thing about that convention is that they sit down and they break down how to, you know, conduct Skelly hearings, and they teach you about like the SPB process. But honestly, that can be done by WebEx. You know what I'm saying? You could sit in front of a freaking camera on your phone or on your laptop and learn how to do that anyways. Oh man, that's crazy. I had no idea that information came out.
Oh yeah, came out big time. But for the most part, they keep it all secret. They keep their spending secret.
Oh yeah, for sure. Until they buy a $2.8 million house for their president. It's like, that dude, I think he lives in that area anyways either.
So yeah,
I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, they got the vice president lives in. They have a fully finished apartment above one of the warehouses. The vice president lives there, and they sit around. They go swimming in the pool. You know, they have Sacramento supposedly come by. They drink Mai Tais and play Yahtzee. You know, they just have a great time with our money.
I know, but they won't give it back to us, and they don't give us to it when we're promised. Like, when I heard about this mental health bonus, I was like, dang, that's That's pretty cool. They threw us a bone. But honestly, like it's kind of a slap in the face now because now that I'm going through all this mental health stuff that I've been struggling with over the last 6+ months, I'm like, man, you're really gonna say that our mental health is only worth $2,400? You know, it's like, and then that we're only worth a 6% raise over 2 years. Like, you know what? Why don't you double it, make it 12, and you give us 6 1 year and 6 the next? But you won't do that. But you'll spend $2.8 million of our money and buy a house with it. You know, you'll buy another property 2 years ago with some horse ranch that was like 1 point something million. It's like I truly believe it's like a real big misappropriation of funds, and that convention is what they use to kind of justify it. They're like, oh, well, we're going to spend all this money on you for this convention. Well, we're going to spend all these millions on us and do what we want. But I don't know. That's for another day, I guess. Like,
one of the shop stewards was telling me that these guys get overtime pay too, even though they don't work overtime, because they say if they were in the prison that they would be working overtime. So they get an overtime pay as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
So they get an overtime pay for not even working.
Yeah, I guess if they do some paperwork, they can get overtime pay, even though they don't work overtime. Because if they were in the prison, they would have the opportunity to work overtime. But since they're not in the prison, they get overtime. It's crazy. That's what one of the shop stewards was telling me.
That's mind blowing. I never thought of that. I would have never guessed that because I've been to that building. Hold on. So I'm thinking trial prep, pre-trial negotiations, another trial prep, and 2 times. So I've been in that building 5 times, and they were never there each time that I went.
Really?
Really? Like
there's no open door policy over there. CCPOA headquarters.
No, there's not. Like you have to have an appointment. Like you have to be there for something like SPV or something. Like you just can't go open that door. There's like a coded lock on it, and like they got to ring you in. Like, hey, oh for sure.
Do they each have their own individual offices, or do they have like a shared office, or?
Honestly, when I go in, I go to the legal department, so it's up the stairs and to the left. All of the this advisory council, I believe each one of them has their own office, and there's a large conference room. But I wasn't afforded the opportunity to go on that side.
Oh wow, they didn't want to give you a tour of the building that you helped pay for, huh?
Oh, for sure they did not. But I mean, I got to tour the legal side. Like,
is it a pretty nice building?
Oh, for sure, it's real nice in there.
Really?
Yeah, definitely.
Wow.
We paid a lot of money to make sure that place looks good.
Let me ask you something. What do you think about the California model? Governor Gavin Newsom starting the California model. And
of what?
Oh, the Norway thing.
Oh man, I believe it. If it's starting, because they're starting it at like the lower level, easy prisons right now. They're starting it like right now. I think the only one that has it, that they're really pushing it at right now is Valley State Prison in Chowchilla. I'm not too sure outside of it, but I believe once it reaches like, prisons that are a little bit more active with, not only just a gang presence, but a SNY gang presence, I think it'll totally get taken advantage of. Like my buddy was at one of my buddies at VSP was telling me, he's like, man, these inmates, like they come up to us and they try to shake our hands. And I was like, I remember, man, like when I first started, like the worst thing you could ever do is shake an inmate's hand. Like you can have that rapport with them, but it never crosses that line. You know what I'm saying? Like, remember, dude, we're on this side, you're on that side, And it's just like, I heard some of them are going to even start having keys to their dorms and all that. And
I heard that. I heard one of the things they want to do is they want to go on a first name basis.
Oh yeah, that's not going to happen. Yeah, that wouldn't happen with me. I would never give anybody my first name. But inmates find it because when you do 837s and incident reports and all that.
Oh yeah.
They have an office tech go and redact them, and no one's perfect. Someone's going to miss a name here and there, and it has, man. I've been going down the tier. Someone's like, hey, da-da-da. And I'm like, what the heck? And I look at them, I'm like, hey man, you don't call me by that. I am so and so, and that's all you're gonna go off of. They're like, well, it's right here on this report that I got. And I go and I grab it and I scribble my name out, and I'm like, dude, dang it, man, like, but or you'll have a clerk that sits next to the office, and I ain't gonna lie, in the offices sometimes when we're away from everything, you'll go by first name and someone's gonna hear it, but yeah, it's not no, it's like you go by that last name basis because it's supposed to be professional, like you know what, I'm going by that because you respect who you are and your title as an officer because they usually like, oh, officer so and so, officer this, and it just differentiates the two, like, oh man, I just believe it just opens the door to over familiarity, and like the potential for officers to be, officers and staff to be compromised, and like, because how does stuff get in? You see a lot of free staff, bringing it in, or at the camp facility, there's a bunch of drop offs and stuff like that. And I believe that, the more laxed and the more you try to, force this other narrative on us, it's like an inmate's going to find a way in and learn how to manipulate it to their own gain. Like, I'll be honest, like that's what they're there for, that they're going to just try to go in there and, learn the system and learn the game, that whatever it is that's there, whether it's strict or not, they're going to try to compromise it and get something brought in. And I believe if you loosen the cuffs and you make it that easy, like with this whole Norway project, how it's like an open door policy, how it's, this and that, and oh, hello, Derek, how are you doing today? Like, oh, I'm doing good, man. How are you? And I just believe it opens the door to, it being more of a potential for, people being compromised and letting these, cell phones come in, drugs coming in, other contraband coming in. And especially right now with fentanyl and all that going off the chain, like there's enough of it going that way with the way it is now with how it's stricter. Imagine once it lightens up, it's only going to make things worse. And that's just at the lower levels. If they want to really start pushing that Norway project with level 4s and level 3s, like real deal, hardcore killing inmates, oh, it's going to be a disaster, especially if you have this open door policy where you can just walk around all night and do this and that. They're going to go, they're going to wake up the next morning and then they're going to see bodies everywhere. Because one thing, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Because on the level 4s, especially right now, with the power vacuum within the Mexican mafia and the power vacuum within the Nuestra Familia, because a lot of inmates recently got swooped up and got sent to the feds, it left a huge power vacuum. And so right now, inmates are attacking and killing each other left and right. Well, if you bring in this Norway project, which gives them access to a lot more time and areas and, open cell all day and night, it's only going to give them a greater potential for them to clean house. And by clean house, I mean killing people, to conduct their politics or to transfer and move their drugs around.
Absolutely. All right, we're coming up on the 2-hour mark. We're going to wrap this up. It's been nice talking to you. I got one final question for you.
Go ahead.
Well, I got 2 questions for you.
Go ahead.
How do you feel your work as a correctional officer contributes to society?
It doesn't.
Really?
It doesn't at all, because, we're a street officer, they're taking criminals off the street, right? That directly correlates with society. You know what I'm saying? I'm just taking what society doesn't want and making sure that it adheres to, the policies and procedures within the society of prison. Now, when it comes to the society within prison, I believe what I've done with over my 8 years, it has affected my partners, because I see my partners as my society now, and that society within. And what I would like to hope that they see is that they see someone that's a leader, someone that puts themselves before others, and someone that really stands up against, honestly the corruption that's within our department and its governing bodies that we're not to be pushed around. And I hope that's in my career. I hope fully that's the difference that I hope that I can make.
Look, here's how I feel about it. A street cop, we need them. They pick these people up, right? They arrest these people, and at the end of the day, they probably never have to see them again. They might have to go to court for them a few times. Then it could be the biggest, the biggest headache person that they're arresting, giving them the hardest time they've ever had, but they don't have to deal with them every day.
Oh, for sure.
Every day we have to go in there and deal
Oh
with
yeah.
these people every day. Lowest of the
Mhm.
low. We've seen the worst of what men can do to other men. It's crazy,
Oh yeah, definitely.
right?
Oh, not only that, but not only men, but women and
Oh yeah.
God and children.
Well,
Like, oh, it's terrible.
absolutely. Let me ask you one final question before we wrap this up. What
Hmm.
advice would you give to someone considering a career as a correctional officer?
What I would honestly tell them is that I would tell them not to waste their potential on it because it's just going down so bad that it's honestly becoming an extremely toxic environment for their officers with the way that administration's just coming after cops with, everything getting better for the inmates and it becoming worse for us. I would honestly tell them if there was something, if they had a skill, like if they knew how to weld, if they were a carpenter at first, or if they had another means, I would tell them to pursue that. I would tell them to really put that effort into that because it changes you. You know what I'm saying? It really does. And looking back at it now that I'm out, now that I've been injured and I've been facing with these like mental demons that I've really been fighting every day, I did see how it changed me. And like honestly, the department will cost you more than it'll ever give you. Because honestly, with my undying loyalty to it, I'll be honest, it cost me my family. Now I see my daughter every day and whenever I want, but it did cost me that family and it took me getting hurt and it took me going through all these, mental struggles to finally see that, you know what, I was wrong because I was so loyal to the cause. But there's a quote that also goes to that. It says the trouble be with loyalty to the cause is that the cause will always betray you. And I never saw that until now because it took from me that money could never give me back. It took from me that a solid team could never give me back. It took my family. But if I was like, if someone was just die hard about getting into this department, the one thing I would say, don't give this job you know, more than the 8 hours that you have to. Don't give this job, your life. Don't come in here and think that you're going to make a difference because you're not. Don't come in here and let it take. Don't come in here and give it so much that it takes from you outside of it. I would tell them to, really work on your mental health. Um, really focus on your family more than anything. If you want to be an overtime hog, great, but make sure that you are dedicating your time and efforts into your family, into the people that love you, into a hobby that truly like helps you decompress and you know work on yourself. Because I ain't gonna lie, working in this department, if you just dedicate too much into it, all that darkness and evil that you're technically fighting every day will look back into you. And it just goes back to another quote, and it says, "Be wary, for he who fights monsters does not become a monster himself. For if you stare into the abyss long enough, it'll stare into you." And I ain't gonna lie, I'm a point in case in that because I never realized it until I was out, and I was like, man, I cannot adjust to normal life, man. Like it's really affected me. So I would honestly tell people just, if you do really want to do that job, just go in there, do your time. You know, you're gonna have to do what you have to do, but make sure that your focus is mainly outside of work. And when you walk out of it, just fucking leave it there because it'll kill you. And trust me, I feel it now. And that's what I would tell somebody going in.
Do your 8 and hit the gate.
Oh, for sure. Just wipe your feet, dude. Wipe your feet. Like, that's the most important thing that, like, I remember even now, they're like, oh, like new guys will come in. They're like, man, we heard about you and this and that, da da da. I'm like, don't. Who cares about that? I was like, they're like, we can't wait to get our first incident and do this and that. I was like, yeah, you can. I was like, I remember I used to look at those cops that had like 8 or 9 years in, and they would say, yeah, I've never used force. I'm like, dude, you're a fucking punk. And that's that's the dark side of it. You know what I'm saying? And but you know what was the difference between them? They actually look happy. And I'm over here like sitting here injured, you know, torn shoulder, torn labrum, bulging discs in my back, degeneration of my knee, severe PTSD. And those dudes, they're out fishing, camping, and doing all this stuff with their family. And I'm like, dang, I wish I had no incidents. You know what I'm saying? I wish I had no uses of force. So it's like, just go in there, do your job. Do your job. Don't do the bare minimum. Do your job. But you know what? Definitely find something outside of this place, man. Because if you don't, and that place becomes everything you have, you're not going to last long. It'll kill you.
All right, man. We're going to wrap it up. We appreciate your advice. Lonzo, everybody. You have a wonderful time. We appreciate you coming on The Real Shit. Appreciate you expressing yourself and telling us your story and your truth, man. It's been an honor.
No, thank you, brother. It's been a pleasure. I got a lot of love for you, man. And
yeah, man.
If you ever need me to come back, I'm here, man.
Yeah, man. So likewise, man. Brothers forever.
Si mo ganon.
Orale.
All right, now.
All right, now. That was Lonzo, folks. Want to thank him for being on the show. The Real Shit. We're out of here.